What's up, everybody? Thank you for watching. Please watch from the beginning to the end because this is filled with a lot of good information. Also, hit the like button, and I want to hear your thoughts afterwards in the comment section below, whether or not you agree with this. To me, this was a little bit difficult to understand at first, but now sitting back and just thinking about the principles Jesus was teaching in Matthew chapter 9, verses 14 through 17, it seems a lot clearer as to the point that he was trying to get across. A lot of people focus so much on the details that they miss the bigger picture. People are looking for hidden symbolic meanings in Jesus's teachings, but a lot of times he's just giving a basic principle and explaining it in a way that they can understand. And this is one of those times. One of those times that you don't look too far into the details, that you miss the overall message, the principle that Jesus was trying to portray to his listeners. And in this case, it says, "Then came to Jesus the disciples of John, saying, 'Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but thy disciples fast not?'" So Jesus is asked about the topic of fasting. And Jesus said unto them, "Can the children of the bride chamber mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them?" Jesus is pictured as the bridegroom. And it says his disciples are pictured as the children of the bride chamber. And as long as Jesus was on the earth, before his crucifixion, before his ascension into heaven, he says they're not going to fast because they're not in a time of sorrow. They're in the times of the Messiah. The Messiah is their present, in their presence. There is no need for them to be sorrowful. They have the teacher. They have the promised Christ, the one through whom all nations would be blessed. But the days will come, Jesus says, when the bridegroom shall be taken from them. When was the bridegroom taken from them? It says when the bridegroom was taken from them, and then shall they fast. The bridegroom was officially taken from the disciples by his ascension into heaven. When you do a study on the Greek word parousia, it's a reference to presence, bodily presence. And Jesus right now is absent. He is no longer present. He is absent. He is taken away from the disciples. And now that Jesus is no longer present, now we live in a time period that Jesus was talking about. They, at this very moment in time, were not living in the time period that the bridegroom was taken from them because the bridegroom was standing right before them. The Messiah was standing right in front of them. The Messiah was not taken from them. Now, Jesus was only taken for 3 days through his death. We learned the disciples were mourning. We learned they were weeping. They locked themselves in a room for fear of the Jews. But this teaching was specifically a reference to Jesus ascending up into heaven. That was when the bridegroom was taken. Not a reference to his death, a reference to his ascension. But we know Jesus, before he could ascend, had to die. He said that the Christ has to suffer in order to enter into his glory. And then this is where people come up with different concepts. This is where people come up with twofold meanings. Crazy applications. But the principle, look, Jesus gives how many examples here? 1, 2. Jesus gives 2 illustrations to portray the principle that he's teaching in verse 15. And pay attention, because if you know this before reading verse 16 and 17, as you read it, you're going to see how much sense this makes. What Jesus is going to say in verses 16 and 17 is everything has a purpose in its time. That's what Jesus is making. An illustration that everything has a purpose in its own time. No man putteth a piece of new cloth unto an old garment, For that which is put in to fill it up taketh from the garment, and the rent is made worse. Okay, so there's the purpose of an old garment, and it served its purpose. And now that the old garment has served its purpose, you get a new garment. You get a new cloth. You don't try to put away, or you don't try to put on the new cloth on the old garment. The old garment served its purpose. And what do? If you want a garment that has no tears in it, you get a new garment. Everything serves its purpose in its own time. And it's not serving a purpose to put a new cloth on an old garment. So Jesus is illustrating his disciples are not going to fast while he's there, because there's a time for that purpose, and it was not yet that time. He says, neither do men put new wine into old bottles, else the bottles break, and the wine runneth out, and the bottles perish. But they put new wine into new bottles, and both are preserved. What does that mean? You don't put the new wine in the old bottles. Otherwise, it'll get bigger and the bottom will break, and you'll ruin your new wine and you'll ruin the bottle. He says, everything serves its purpose in its own time. You don't put new wine in old bottles. He says they put new wine into new bottles. What is he trying to portray here? Is this some hidden concept? Is the garment somehow connected to the bottles? Well, only by principle. But concerning anything else, no. The garment is not connected to the bottle. Some people say, look, this talks about new. This talks about old. That's new covenant, old covenant. People are looking so far into the details, they're missing the basic concept that Jesus is teaching, the illustration of Jesus, that everything serves a purpose in its own time. He says, just as it's unfit to sew new cloth to an old garment, just as it's unfit to put new wine into old wineskins, it would be unfit for the children of the bride chamber to mourn while the bridegroom is with them. He says, yes, they will fast, but when? When the bridegroom is taken from them, a reference to his ascension into heaven. What are your thoughts about that? Did you know that? Was that difficult for you at one time to understand about the new cloth and the old garment and the new wine and the old bottles? But if you remember, before you read those sentences, that the illustration Jesus is bringing forth is everything serves a purpose in its own time. It makes it so easy to understand. It'd be nearly impossible to miss the principle that he's portraying there. It's not difficult, it's simple, and making difficult the simple makes the simple difficult. Think of the simple as simple. And this is a simple teaching. It's an illustration. What are your thoughts about this? I'd like to hear them below. Did this video help you as much as it helped me? I hope so. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.